Hello, hello! Welcome to another episode of History in the Dark. I am your host, Darkness the Curse. And before we begin, as always, thank you so much to my generous patrons, my British Rail critics, and of course, my underwater train finders. You are the reason why this content remains hideous. And today, we are going to discuss 5 trains that... Well, I was really hesitant to actually do a list like this, even though I keep getting consistent requests for it. It's one of those things where I'm like, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, though. I've seen plenty of arguments started because some people think certain locomotives just look ugly, but to other people, they look fine, or even good. It just varies. So I've tried really hard to narrow down this list to locomotives that I think, objectively, it can't be argued that they look pretty frickin' dumb, or ugly, or gross, or whatever it may be. Like, these are actual, legitimate eyesores, and that's where I'm going with it. So let's talk about 5 of the most disturbingly ugly trains ever. The British Rail Class 43 HST Prototype. Now, I do want to stress that I'm specifically discussing the prototype of the Class 43. The Class 43 itself, I think, looks pretty good, and is a great locomotive, always has been. No question, that's the reason why they're actually still in operation to this day. But when they were testing the initial prototypes of it, their design ethos was kind of all over the place. It went from, let's stick what is clearly a kitchen oven on the front of our locomotive, to, I have no idea what that even is supposed to be, to looking a bit better but still got that oven thing going on. Really, it just never looked good at any point as a prototype, and it was only when they finally introduced the production models that they wound up realizing, oh yeah, we should probably make this look aesthetically presentable. And like I said, the Class 43 looks great, no question about it. The actual final product turned out awesome, but that prototype though? Oof. The Cross Maffei ML4000. What is going on with that cab? Some people may like this, but for the most part, I have found that most people don't like it. It was manufactured between 1961 and 1969 by German manufacturer Cross Maffei in Munich, Germany. They were pretty impressive machines, to be fair, in terms of operation. They were diesel hydraulics, for one, and they were capable of 3,540 horsepower from their 2 Maybach V16 engines. 37 in total were produced, which sounds like a small amount, and that's because, well, they were foreign. And though they were fairly reliable, American manufacturers like EMD started to catch up with the technology, particularly with their diesel electrics. Diesel hydraulics require a different maintenance ethos, and it wasn't justifiable to manage them that way. Southern Pacific also found that they were unsatisfactory when traveling over the Sierra Nevada mountain range, so they had to relegate them to flat territory throughout California. And eventually they completely fell out of favor, and the last one was retired in 1984. One is preserved though, Southern Pacific number 9010, but I still can't get over that cab, and I think I know what's wrong with it. It's kind of a European-style cab, but it's attached to an American-style body. So it just looks weird no matter who looks at it. The JNR Class C53. Hey look, another Japanese locomotive. These were built by Kawasaki Heavy Industries Rolling Stock Company Keisha Saizo. Yes, that is the whole name. From 1928 to 1929, and a total of 97 were produced. And you're probably really confused because that doesn't look ugly at all. That looks absolutely fine for a steam locomotive. What's wrong with it? And the answer is nothing, actually. Not in the base form, anyway. These locos were pretty good, and they lasted a decent amount of time as well. But there was a period in time when they were like, hey, what if we streamlined them? Now, streamlining a locomotive is always a risky proposition, especially when the design did not take it into account when they were initially built. Some locomotives wound up actually looking pretty good with streamlining. Locomotives like 611, for example, have the streamlining built into their bodies, and 611 looks really good. Beautiful, in fact. But the streamlining for the C53 was, well, it looked like this. Oh dear. That's not, no, that is, ew. Like, to be honest, some people may think this doesn't look that bad, but I guess my thing about it is that you took a perfectly fine steam locomotive and just ruined it with this. It looks terrible, and what kills me about it is that apparently the streamlining didn't really do much for these. The C-53s were never very fast, and with the streamlining, they managed to reach a rocket pace of 60 miles an hour. So, not really that exciting in the grand scheme of things. They wound up way uglier than they were ever supposed to, and it was really serving no purpose at all. Kind of a fail all around in that regard. The EMC 1800 HP B-B experimental units. Oh, now we're getting into good stuff, because, wow, ew. That is my reaction to that. But to be fair to EMC, this wasn't the initial form of these things. They were supposed to be box cab diesels, and the demonstrators wound up looking, honestly, kind of like a DMU. But Santa Fe in particular wound up rebuilding these into that. They added raised cabs and these little stubby noses that, honestly, it just looks like an E unit or an F unit that slammed into a wall. They definitely stuck out in this manner, but good lord does that look awful. Based on what I've been able to gather, they didn't actually stay in this form forever, and they were actually rebuilt into E8Bs in 1953, as the box cab units were originally developed in 1935, and they were a bit dated by then. They lasted till the 1970s in that form, actually, and one wound up preserved, believe it or not. It just didn't look like this. Thank goodness. Because, no. The Belgian State Railways 242 Triple Boiler Locomotive, number 195. Oh my lord, Belgium! Y'all were getting some mad science up in here. I don't even know where to begin. Alright, so this looks weird, and some call it ugly, but you may have figured out what's going on with this thing based off of the, name of it, the triple boiler. It does, in fact, have 3 boilers, technically. It was built in 1888, and the intent was to fit more boiler capacity between the driving wheels. In this case, by the simple method of literally attaching 2 smaller boilers to each side of the center main one, resulting in a very bizarre-looking locomotive. Also, it wound up with this weird, almost ornate chimney that had to be widened to encompass all the boilers. It gives the locomotive a bizarre appearance, to say the least, and some might call it ugly. And to be honest, I would agree. It was not considered successful, though. The Belgian State Railways actually refused to accept it from the manufacturer because steaming on it was poor. Yeah, it had 3 boilers, but it didn't steam well, because somehow they managed to pull that off. There was an indirect connection between the lateral boilers and the smoke box, so it struggled to reach its full potential. Eventually, the state did opt to use it, as they had paid for it anyway, and it was put into service as number 195. It ran exclusively on the Brussels-Ostend line. Even when it was in service, the poor steaming characteristics never really went away, and crews disliked it because it didn't have a running board. But this was viewed as a minor problem. The much more alarming problem was that since there were 3 boilers, the things that could go wrong in a steam boiler were suddenly multiplied by 3, and while I couldn't figure out exactly what caused it, one of the lateral boilers on the side exploded in 1902 near Austinville Station. The locomotive was not rebuilt after this cataclysmic failure, and it wound up being scrapped. An interesting experiment, I'll give it that. But man, that just does not look good no matter how I look at it. Before we go, a special thank you to all my underwater train finders. Thomas Ward, Lord Captain Von Thrust III, Sumdude 267, Brightline Blue, Joshua Long, Ohio Trucker 1, Royal Hudson 2860, Lord Hoth 444, Arthur Roy, Benjamin Owens, Panzer Kitsune 131-232, Mr. Black Rose, Tribal Typhoon, Master of None, Josh Johnson, and Lock Kraken. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.